How is it over there?
Is it any worse than it usually is? Test, 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 test. Everybody in the back of the room hearing me? Test, 3, 2, 1. Test, test. Test, test. 3, 2, 1. Test. Normal hum?
No, it's bad.
Bad buzz today?
It's horrible.
Test, test, 3, 2, 1. Let's see if we can try to reset something. No idea. Cool.
Cool. I'm afraid the microphone's configured, so I'm not gonna say anything. Just so you know, I'm not blowing you out. Good. Of course. And I love you even more after today. Still there, Jack?
So I apologize for the crudity of the system. I'm an audio tech in my spare time. Test, 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 test. Test, test. Are you guys getting better audio on this? Test, 3, 2, 1. Test. Sounds the same but louder?
Yeah. We can hear you clearly. That's awesome.
Always better, huh? Test, 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 test. Test, test, test. I'm sorry.
Now it's even worse.
I don't mind the microphones. Do you mind putting your microphones? Just have you put your microphones up here. No, we still need a car recording. And those lavalier mics should be able to pick up all of you.
Most speaking. That's good.
call this meeting of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors to order. We do have Supervisor Sellers on the phone, and again, we have the rest of the board here as well. Tomorrow will mark 2 months since this board acted to suspend the county assessor, Paul Peterson. Mr. Peterson has appealed this decision and has called upon the Board of Supervisors to reverse that suspension. His attorney argues that you cannot have neglect of duty if the statutory duties of the office are being fulfilled. I, as one person, disagree with this view of the law. I believe that there are additional duties that elected officials own to their constituents beyond just making sure that the office runs properly. Now today, after this meeting, we're going to be issuing a supplemental report to the preliminary report that we received back in early December. This supplemental report has information that the public needs to know. First of all, this report provides that Mr. Peterson directed an assessor's office employee to use taxpayer money to purchase the laptop computer, which this board has requested on multiple occasions for the Microsoft store at the Scottsdale Fashion Square Mall back in 2017. Mr. Peterson's county computer, this one that was purchased back in 2017, was wiped clean twice. Once on October 30th, 2019, the day after Mr. Peterson was released from custody in Arkansas, and secondly, that computer was wiped again on November 12th, 2019. There were also searches done on that computer after our counsel, Mr. Doran, had requested that computer from Mr. Peterson. These searches were done on November 29th, 2019, for subjects like how to delete cookies, how to delete Microsoft Word, and how to delete Microsoft Edge. Now, despite these multiple efforts to wipe the computer, we were able to find over 2,000 documents on that county laptop related to Mr. Peterson's private adoption practice. Some of these documents include screenshots of messages from Mr. Peterson to women who had changed their minds about giving up their babies, including the following. Mr. Peterson advising that he would remove his name from that apartment, causing that woman to be evicted. Mr. Peterson advising that he could sever the parental rights of a father who was not willing to sign adoption papers. And a message from Mr. Peterson stating, "All you girls work for me, not the other way around." Finally, the supplemental report concludes that these findings regarding the laptop are violations of 4 separate Arizona laws. Now, to say that the information in this supplemental report is disturbing to all of us on the board is certainly an understatement. I'd like to take a moment now to just briefly summarize how we got here and then open it up to comments from my colleagues and any possible motions. As you all know, Mr. Peterson was arrested on October 8th, 2019 in connection with criminal charges in 3 separate jurisdictions. The board voted unanimously on October 28th, 2019 to suspend Mr. Peterson pursuant to ARS 11664. 4 days before the board voted to suspend Mr. Peterson, I sent a letter to Mr. Peterson through the U.S. Marshal asking him to answer 2 questions. 1, since you were arrested and detained on October 8th, 2019, how are you fulfilling your duties as the elected assessor? And 2, please explain how and why over 1,000 documents relating to your private legal practice are stored on your county desktop and or the county servers or physically stored in your county office. Mr. Peterson did not respond to those questions either personally or through his attorney, and in fact to date he still has not answered these 2 questions from the Board of Supervisors. On December 11th, 2019, we held a hearing regarding the board's decision, and this was based upon Mr. Peterson appealing our decision. At that hearing, Mr. Peterson had the opportunity to present testimony, call witnesses, and present evidence to support his position that the board had erred in suspending him back on October 28th. Mr. Peterson called just 2 witnesses. One of those witnesses that he called was Tim Bonkoski, the chief deputy of the assessor's office. Mr. Bonkoski testified to a very important project that the assessor's office is doing, the Mars project, which is a significant computer update in that area. He testified that when he realized that they were not going to be able to complete the Mars project on time, he called me as the chair of the board to inform me of it. He was unable to contact the assessor because the assessor was in custody at that time. The Stein supplemental report, which we'll be providing to you, states that nothing in the hearing caused them to change any of their previous findings or conclusions. Now, I believe that the assessor obviously did not fulfill his duties when he was in custody for 20 days. And I also believe that he neglected his duties as well by having documents related to the adoption practice on his county computer. But beyond that, Mr. Peterson also has a duty to protect county property. And he failed to fulfill that duty when he allowed that county computer to be used for that private adoption practice. And now, based upon this supplemental report, we know what sort of communications were on that computer. These were shocking text messages that I related to you earlier. And we also know now that someone was so concerned about the documents that were on that computer that they intentionally wiped the computer twice, on October 30th, 2019, and on November 12th. And we also know that that county computer is no longer in the possession of Maricopa County. That computer is in the possession of the Arizona Attorney General's office, and that is due to the actions of Mr. Peterson. What we have learned from both the preliminary report and the supplemental report, in my mind, is more than enough to establish neglect of duty, and I also believe that it supports a finding of willful misconduct in office. And with that, I'll turn it to my colleagues for any comments or a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Gallardo.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank you publicly for your leadership through this whole process. This has not been easy for any of us. I believe we have all taken this extremely serious, and I have, over the last 2 months, have just worked to keep an open mind. I wanted to kind of take the politics out of it and just look at what's in the best interest of the taxpayers, what's in the best interest of the assessor's office and Maricopa County. I do want to thank the hardworking employees over the last 2 months that have seen this all play out in the media and so on. These are hardworking employees that show up every day. They do their job and they do it well. Unfortunately, they have not had leadership in that office over the last, in my opinion, two months, and I would venture out to say even beyond that. Nonetheless, I kept an open mind. I wanted to wait until the final report came out. Looking over every one of the documents that have been provided, including the report that was given to us this morning, I'm outraged. This is unconscionable. The types of tactics that the assessor has Mr. Peterson has engaged in, the comments that have been found on the laptop is just outrageous. There's a reason why we light this building every October purple. It's to bring awareness against domestic violence. It's to bring awareness against sexual assault. It's to be able to offer a signal to our employees and to the public that that if you are involved or engaged in some type of domestic violence or a bad situation, that there is help available. And when I see comments such as threatening these women to remove their name from the apartment and causing them to be evicted, threatening them to be homeless, unless they follow his direction. When I see comments about he is willing to offer his name as a parental rights of a father, and I also see comments to the women that you girls work for me, not the other way around. This is unconscionable. It is outrageous that Paul Peterson has engaged in this type of activity on county time. That's even a double whammy. He has used taxpayers' resources to not only fulfill his own personal gain, but he has utilized these women like no other before. This is human trafficking at its best. You cannot describe it any more than human trafficking, and he did it while he was on the clock here in Maricopa County. I believe from day one that we did the right thing to suspend him. I still believe we were on the right track. We did what was allowed to under state statute, and I think this final report has just reaffirmed to us that we were on the right track. So, Mr. Chairman, for those reasons and for many other more, I support upholding the suspension of Paul Peterson, and I support the starting of the process of misconduct in office.
Thank you, Supervisor Gallardo. Supervisor Sellers, do you have any comments?
Chairman, no, I don't really have anything to add to that. I just, this has been very frustrating for all of us. We just want to ensure that the office runs smoothly and ensure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that the county is doing what's proper for our constituents.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those comments. Supervisor Chukri.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You outlined this in your comments, but I think they deserve to be mentioned yet again. So let's follow the evolution of where we are today. We started this suspension when Mr. Peterson was in custody. He was not acting. He was not able to act in his elected duty as assessor. Moreover, we heard in our December 11th hearing from his chief deputy that he did not reach out to him because he was in custody. He reached out to you as chairman of this body instead. So clear evidence to me that we have every right, we had every right to do what we did when we made this suspension. As we move forward, that, not by us, but through statute, that triggered other things to happen. One of those was, as I said, a remedy outlined in statute that allows for a hearing to take place, allows for this whole process to unfold. And so one troubling thing to me, there are many mentioned here this morning, but in addition to that, was Mr. Peterson's counsel referring to this remedy outlined in statute as that of us following the Soviet bloc, the former communist Soviet Union, and that we were acting like a one-time communist country. And that is not only absurd, it's desperate. And I take umbrage with that. Moreover, if we continue to follow the bouncing ball and what we just learned in this report that I know we'll share with everyone after this, of some of the documents you mentioned, 867 pertain to that were on his laptop, medical records. 429 were agreements related to adoption services. 342 were pleadings and affidavits. 216 were law office bank records. 72 were adoption files relating to multiple different documents. 71 were pleadings and a petition for an adoption. Others were 70 were law office, others related to adoption services. 53 documents were text messages with clients that had to pertain to his law office. 47 were court orders or reports pertaining to adoption, and 40 documents were pleadings or orders of bankruptcy. So what does that say? It says a few things. One, to me, as a supervisor, as representing my district, it speaks volumes. But to me, Maricopa County is an institution of public trust. Mr. Peterson used it as his own personal currency. That's what this says. In addition, there are also 4 statutes that this new document reflects that he potentially violated. And that's ARS 38-421, ARS 13-2407, ARS 13-1602, ARS 13-2809. So we've all remained quiet during this process, Mr. Chairman. We left it to your very able leadership. But now I think it's time for us all to speak out as we have, to just how not only disappointing this is to us as a board, of a colleague, but that is not becoming of any public official, and it certainly is not becoming of what we stand for as a county. The fastest growing county in America, the fourth largest county in America. That is not becoming of who we are, nor is that a statement of who we are. So with that, I get back to you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Chukri. Vice Chairman Hickman.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'd like to thank you. I've been Vice Chairman through this process, and it has been a great privilege of mine to watch this board and how they deal with from what I know of, is a first-time ever occurrence where we're talking about a publicly elected official and how he's been working or not working in this office. So I want to let you know how much I've appreciated watching you navigate this. I also want to appreciate this board. And, you know, Steve, when you say open mind, you know, this is, sorry, but this is a public board, and we are publicly elected officials representing our individual districts, and I am very happy that you mentioned that, because it has been tough. We've been hearing from a lot of people as this has been swirling around, but I think that we have treated this issue extremely diligently. You've mentioned politics and trying to keep politics out of it, and I appreciate that too. But that is how we get elected to these public service jobs. I am going to be asking soon for the Maricopa County Republican Party and the state Republican Party to consider asking Mr. Paul Peterson once again to resign this office. I feel this office has been, lately in the last couple months, have been treated as leverage for something entirely different. So I hope that they would consider taking a stand with us on this board, especially now that this supplemental report has come out. The supplemental report is not just for us to see, but it's for the public to see. It is for his office to see how he treated this office. And I am extremely upset and have been upset through this entire process. That being said, we are to guard not just the public treasury, but also the public trust, as Supervisor Chukri has said. So sometimes we have a tough job here, and that's what we have been dealing with over the last several months. So again, thank you to the board for navigating these very difficult waters. I agree with everything that's been said. So Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make two motions. The first motion is that we move to sustain the 120-day suspension of Assessor Paul Peterson pursuant to ARS 11-664 and issue an opinion in support of our decision. Motion number two. Should we take one motion at a time?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay,
I'll
that's my
second the
motion.
first motion, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this motion? All right, then we will have a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Sellers?
Aye.
Supervisor Chukri?
Aye.
Supervisor Hickman?
Aye.
Supervisor Gallardo?
Aye.
And Chairman Gates?
Aye. All right, so the motion passes unanimously. And then did you have a second motion?
Yes, I do have a second motion, Mr. Chairman. I move to recommend the county attorney pursue removal of the Assessor Paul Peterson for willful misconduct in office pursuant to ARS 38-341.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion from the Vice Chairman, a second from Supervisor Chukri. Any further discussion on this motion? All right, if not, Madam Clerk, please call a roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Sellers?
Aye.
Supervisor Chukri?
Aye.
Supervisor Hickman?
Aye.
Supervisor Gallardo?
Aye.
And Chairman Gates?
Aye. And that motion passes unanimously as well. Unless there is any further business to be handled at this meeting of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors is adjourned.